Hey, it's Drew. I recorded this episode on March 3rd. I typically don't tell you the date I record it, but it's amazing what's happened between now and then. The episode is with Mika Yamamoto, who is the CMO and CXO of F5. I think it's still an incredibly relevant conversation. We talked a lot about the power of those two roles working together and being underneath one, and how that enabled Mika and the team to remove friction and increase delight, bringing those together. She talked about how it helped align sales and marketing, how it got the values together and have shared metrics between sales and marketing. She talked about creating a specific customer effort score instead of NPS, which means that they could measure how hard was it for customers to do business with F5. In the end, we also get to her purpose-driven story statement of code connects us all, and how that language helped bring together all of their marketing activities. In the end, it's a conversation about simplifying and being human. Two things that are timeless and powerful. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Hello, Renegade Thinkers. I'm very fond of saying simple is hard. Yeah, I'll repeat that for you. Simple is hard. Any number of times in my career, I've seen presentations where senior executives on the client side have offered suggestions, and they sort of work their way up the chain in an attempt to add value. But what they were really doing is adding complexity to whatever project we were engaged in. Now let's think about the apps that you use most on your phone. Almost all of them started by doing one thing that felt magical. Not 100. Think Instagram, just that flick of the picture. Think Google Maps, you found it, or Waze, you got to where you wanted to go. The ones that you don't use typically try to do too many things, or were either too hard to learn or simply forgettable. When it comes to marketing campaigns, the more messages, the more confusion. As Michael Porter famously stated, the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. But how do you keep things simple? It's so easy to say. How do you align an organization with a common vision and values, especially if that company is in transition from being known for one thing to another? Well, these are a few of the not so simple questions that we're going to tackle on this show with my guest, Mika Yamamoto, who is the Chief Marketing and Customer Experience Officer of F5, a Seattle-based tech company with over 5,000 employees. So Mika, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here in New York City.
Thank you, Drew. It's great to be here.
So it's we have to start with the first thing, which is you have the CXO, and I will say that maybe 2 or 3 CMOs that I've interviewed, over 300, have also had that title. And most of the time it was because they complained about the customer experience and they said, well, if you're so smart, fix it. How did that come into being? How did you end up with both of those titles?
I knew I was going into F5 with a transformation at hand. The whole company is going through a transformation. As you'd said, we're moving from one product set to an entirely different type of way of selling a different product set. And marketing is within the crosshairs of that. But often when you're moving from one business model, one product set to another, it actually isn't a marketing feat. It is a feat of the entire company. And so knowing that that was ahead of us, was very cognizant of the fact that it was going to require an entire lift from a customer experience standpoint end to end, and thought if the company was going to be most successful, this is the type of role that was required. And just a little bit of careful what you ask for. I was like, okay, well then why don't you come on and do both? Why don't you be marketing officer and customer experience officer?
So let me ask you this. It's a hard job being a CMO. What gave you the confidence that in I will say the courage to take both of those roles on?
You know, previously I had come from Adobe, where I was president of Marketo, and we were acquired by Adobe. And so I went from being chief digital marketing officer at one company, which has a functional depth, to one of president, which essentially requires you to drive the trade-offs among functions. And that gave me an incredible appreciation for making trade-offs among functions and really impacting either a marketing message or the customer experiences. Does require that end-to-end view. Every single function, though they, as altruistic and as amazing as the leaders are, they do think for their individual function. And unless someone has the responsibility to look end-to-end, it's really challenging for one functional leader to do that. And so I got a perspective and an appreciation for that end-to-end view and the trade-offs as being present, owning multiple functions, and realized how much was required from an end-to-end view standpoint to really change and transform a company. And that's where that recommendation was born for F5.
And what's interesting there is, so you had a general management role, which gave you a broader perspective, which enabled you to see that you can't solve a lot of problems that companies have with marketing. Right. They're more fundamental. And so a lot of times, and this is an interesting one, CMOs will take a job where they know there's an experience problem, or they'll know there's a product problem, if you will. And often they're the same in service organizations. And they're stuck, kind of. They can't do it. But I imagine there's a different skill set. To fix customer experience is very different than fixing marketing.
It's definitely a different set of experiences. And I think that the key from a customer experience standpoint to rally the whole company is honestly to think outside of marketing jargon, which I don't, I will go into a meeting and say, okay, I've got my customer experience hat on, and we'll use business terms and terminology and talk about shareholder value and customer experience and customer value and customer satisfaction, and terms that are entirely different from how we would talk about marketing. And frankly, I think that marketers do themselves a disservice by using marketing jargon that only marketers understand versus real words that business people understand. And so it is a different mindset and a different viewpoint, and rallying across multiple functions to truly be impactful to affect the customer experience requires a common language or taxonomy, which most officers at a company or senior leaders understand: shareholder value, customer satisfaction. And so it is having that different conversation that's, I think, required in order to motivate and inspire the other leaders within the company to join forces and do something about our customer experience overall.
So part of that is implicit in that is keeping things simple. Jargon complicates things because it means only. I also think that there's often sort of jargon is used as a substitute. It's like PowerPoint. They're used as substitutes for thinking, and it's like, oh, well, let's just add another bullet, right. As opposed to actually write a sentence that has a noun and a verb and an adjective or not, that actually explains and advances the story. Okay, so you have these two titles, you've eliminated jargon. Let's talk about an example of, and I think in our prep call you talked about data as an example of things that you could do or tackle to try to improve customer experience from the ground up.
Yeah, I mean, if we think about having a common view for the customer, we need to have a common perspective of that customer. At our company specifically, up until a few months ago, we had 36 data stores of different sets of customer data. And so it's the old adage of what part of the elephant are you touching? I'm touching a tree, I'm touching, leather, et cetera. And everyone was touching a different part of the relationship for the customer, but it only gave them partial view of what the customer was really experiencing. And so the opportunity we have is to link all those pieces together to get a holistic view, to understand the implications of, pushing one button might suboptimize or might make another thing in another room happen that you may not know. And until you link all that information and drive insights end to end, you don't quite realize the implications of what you're subjecting your customers to. And so this enables us to be able to see the whole relationship and appreciate all the things that we're doing to delight our customers and possibly friction points that we are driving to maybe put some speed bumps in the way of our customer experiences.
So I have a couple of thoughts. So first of all, you snuck in there the notion of what's causing friction and what's causing delight. And in our pre-call, it really struck me the ability to reduce customer experience to those two things that's a magical moment. And we're going to pause. If you're driving, don't pull off the road, but everything about the customer experience should either make it easier for them or it should provide some level of delight. And I think that's fascinating. Did you bring that from somewhere else, or has that been a perspective of yours for a while?
I think that's been a perspective for a while because that's what I think our role is, right? It is making things simpler for people, and in doing so, hopefully there's some points of magical delight. I mean, even if we're talking about a B2B instance of engaging with a customer, and it could be marketing, it could be with a product, at the other end of those products are still human beings. And I feel like as B2B marketers, we often decide that we can be really creative and inspiring with B2C type marketing and consumer-based marketing, but B2B has to be drier, more jargony, more technical. But yet we're still dealing with the same human beings who are inspired by the simplicity of an application or the heartfelt messaging that may come from a consumer message. And why can't we do that with our own messaging and our own approach to experiences with our customers? And so it has been something that I've been driving a lot of in former roles in whether it's been marketing or general management roles, is just saying, look, let's boil this down, look end to end, and think about how we're either if the flip side is you're either complicating things and making people really sad, right? And we do that really well, not intentionally, but we do that by looking at your own individual function, by solving something that might be a moment of delight in that small individual function, but causing a roadblock down the way. So unless we look up and unless we look end to end, we may be inadvertently causing more harm than good in looking somewhat in a siloed or myopic way at the customer experience.
So if I think about it on a personal level, it's know me and know that I've done business with you and know how that I've done business with you. I'm curious in terms of, you brought all this data in theory, into a giant lake or something. And what were some instances where you were able to take what it would have been a negative experience and turn it into a positive? Can you think of an example of a situation?
Absolutely. So where we had all our information, we knew what companies owned certain products, but we actually didn't have the contact information linked to those companies in the same database. And so we knew what products people owned, and we knew there were certain products that were actually going to end of life and end of support. But we couldn't proactively reach out to those companies in a simple way. And so in some cases, some companies reached the end of their support or end of life of some of their products, but we didn't proactively give them a heads up. And so that was a moment of sadness. That certainly was a moment of complexity versus simplicity and delight for saying, hey, heads up, this is coming. What decision would you like to make? And so the ability to link the ownership experience with the contact information and the foresight to say, hey, let's start driving alerts for customers, within X days of something possibly happening to them. Let's not I don't love surprises that are negative, surprises that are delightful or nice. Most people don't. And so this helped us to be able to link the information and then proactively put it in an alert that says, hey, let's get in touch with our customers before this happens to them so they have a choice and they can prepare.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to continue to explore this simple but difficult process of either removing friction or increasing delight. Stay with us. Hey, it's Drew, and I wanted to have a quick conversation about turning lemons into lemonade. Here are the lemons. Skiing, Park City, January 11th, third day, last run, going fast. Light was bad, a lot of snow on the ground. 50 yards from the bottom, I crashed and burned. Literally tumbling down the mountain, did a 3-point landing with my head and 2 thumbs. Broke the right thumb, sprained the left thumb, finished up surgery 5 days later. And now I have a little extra time on my hands. What do? I finish a special report that I've been dying to finish for a long time, which is a way for me to get to my next book. It's a preview of the book. You can find it on renegade.com. On the very beginning of the homepage at the top, there's a banner that says B2B Special Report. I would love it if you took a look at this and let me know what you thought. I think you're going to find a lot of value in it. Okay, we're back. And you provided that example. I'm always thinking about it on a personal level. One of the things that drives me crazy is, the cable company that knows that the modem that you have is 3 years old, which means that the speed that you are getting is much worse than you should be getting, and they don't proactively do anything about it. And that was an interesting point. It sounded like you were proactively reminding your customer, but it was also in your interest to do so, right?
Sure, it's in our interest to, absolutely. We are, most companies out there that are publicly traded are for-profit companies that are there to serve their shareholders. I think what the serendipitous element here is that if you treat your customers well, turns out they'll be more loyal, they'll be happier, they'll continue to purchase and invest and tell other friends to invest with you. And it's virtuous all around. You've got happy customers, you've got happy shareholders. So one leads to the next. And I find that if you're very focused on, customer experiences that drive, again, either delight or remove friction, you can achieve both goals. I think the key and the complexity for us is picking which one, right? Every individual function will have an idea or a notion of what simple looks like. Some people don't all define it that way. And if you talk about the relative benefit to the customer and the business, they're not all treated equal. And so I think that the advantage to having a function that looks at customer experience across the board is you're able to look across the board at the benefits and trade-offs of investing in one area versus another. Just because all companies, regardless of their profit margins, have finite time, people, and money. And you should do fewer things better. That's a notion of simplicity, is doing fewer things better. It typically lends to simpler ways and focus. So I think that that's an opportunity for all of us, is to prioritize across functions.
And totally agree. And I'm curious. So we've talked about, you want to improve the customer experience, and you aren't in control of the day-to-day activities of every employee that might touch a customer. And so I'm curious, what things did you do to make sure that there was alignment and got, because if, for example, everybody in the sales organization is only compensated for new customer acquisition, then nobody's going to be thinking about current customers. So were there comp changes? Were there evaluation changes? Were there recognition? What did you do to sort of realign, if that was necessary?
Yeah. Great question. We did 3 things. So number 1, we did do comp changes. But comp changes around shared metrics would be number 2. So we presented shared metrics, where we share metrics across functions so that multiple functions have accountability, but different accountabilities based on their functions, ability to contribute to that metric. So opportunity creation, which is what we all are motivated to do as B2B companies typically, is create opportunities. But if we pulled the number across functions, and we're accountable across functions, but that only works if you're compensated well or not if you meet your number. And typically marketing functions aren't compensated on a variable compensation model, where based on the performance of the business and based on your own performance from a financial standpoint, does your compensation shift. And then we made that shift. The third really important element also was to shift a definition of our values, and our values and we're in process of doing this now, and looking at all of our values and talking about the actual behaviors that we would like to see out of all those values that would truly demonstrate that you're focused on the customer. And of course, we hope that all people are great people and want to live by our values, but we actually have part of the variable compensation component, hinged on people demonstrating values. So if you triple your numbers, which means that you could, in some organizations, tripling your numbers would mean that you would get all of your bonus or even more. If you triple your numbers, however, don't adhere to our values, you actually are guaranteed to not even make 100% of your bonus. So the how you do your work is very much tied to the work that you do, which includes how you treat each other and then how you treat our customers.
It's so interesting that, comp drives behavior. And if you look at the metrics and you look what rewards, it does. And so this has always been a problem in sales organizations where you have the superstar jerk salesperson, and but everybody puts up with them because these are really, and it's a he almost always, a really good hunter, but he's a really bad person. And if you reward that behavior, you've sent a clear message to the organization. But I also thought it was interesting, cross-functional metrics is so important in this day and age. And the notion that one department would be measured by one measure, it's kind of ridiculous, but it exists. I would say it's the predominant way companies operate. So that's a really interesting thing. I imagine there was some negotiation involved in this too, because each of the departments are saying, well, I can't really have an impact on that area, so why are you holding me accountable to that? When in fact, there's probably some oars that they could put in the water that once they recognize. So talk a little bit about how you got to those shared metrics.
Well, there's that I can't really impact that. And so what we've decided to do is have a finite set of metrics for which every single individual from admin to me, CM, the Chief Marketing and Customer Experience Officer, is beholden to a main set of five key, objectives or goals. Which those are the kind of parent goals, if you will, and there's child goals or sub goals that go with that, but everything ladders up to the core five. And so every single human being on the team, contractors included, have goals that ladder up to the broader goals, so you can actually see your straight line and your path to that goal, because everybody does drive an impact, and if you don't see that path, then you won't drive that path. And so we need to help people define their roles and drive accountability so that they do see that path, whether they're in comms, they're in the creative studio, or if they actually are, driving our Marketo instance or our search engine marketing, which is a clear path to driving the result. I think on the receiving end, and with us, the key partnership is with sales. The other partnership was with support, is actually trust. Right? How do you typically see in B2B organizations, especially ones that have been around for 15, 20 years, is a very traditional stance of you marketing, you help with pictures and fonts and logos. You don't add value from a business standpoint, so show me the numbers. And so that building of trust is something that definitely is required to make sure that the opportunities we create are opportunities that the business in fact values, and in fact does something with. And we have metrics that show, look, we brought this opportunity in, and this is how it closed and this is its value, which means a distinguishing factor of there's, marketing sourced and marketing influenced pipeline. Right. I care not actually to get much credit for marketing influence because it becomes a very squishy number that no one believes outside of marketing. Right. And so that's not one that we're going to litigate at all. Okay. We're going to track it inside marketing because it's important, but outside of marketing, it becomes a fictitious number.
This is the marketing
influenced.
Right.
That's right. Well, they attended an event and you can't really directly say that you brought it in. And so the agreement we had was that I would rather lay claim to 3 things than 3.1 million things, and categorically be able to say those 3 things are things that if we hadn't existed, they wouldn't have been delivered, because that is true incremental value. And so that is where we are placing a lot of our emphasis on, the marketing source pipe and the shared number for opportunity create. There's recognition in the company that the influenced component of our world from a marketing standpoint does add value, but we're not going to put that on a financial metric just because no one really believes it and no one really hangs their revenue or their bookings number. I mean, the sellers aren't going to look to try to hinge their probability of retiring quota on that number. And if they're not, it doesn't matter to them. And so it's not worth convincing anybody that it should matter. We just know it does matter and it does drive influence and impact. And so we just stand in the background and we drive that as marketers, but we really focus on the marketing sourced pipe, which is something that we're very, very focused on making sure that if it's created and it's handed over to sales, that there's a very explicit contract that something's going to be done with it in a timely manner, so that, but there has to be trust that it is actually worth doing something with.
I was talking to an individual recently who was very proud of the fact that they had gotten up to 40% marketing sourced pipeline. Would you be proud of that number?
I think that might be. I think the question mark I would have is that, is anyone else proud of that number, and is anyone else actually relying on that number? And if anybody else, and anybody else meaning the sellers, right? If they're not excited by it, then it's not really exciting for me because it's self-congratulatory somewhat. And then I would be curious to see whether that 40% of marketing influence pipe actually closed at a higher rate, or if it actually was of greater value. And so I would not want to see the pipeline itself, but I would want to see the impact of that pipeline on bookings. And if I can say that, lay some claim that says, look, we influenced this part of the pipeline and we didn't this pipeline, but of what we influenced, actually those deals are bigger and those deals close faster, or they close at a higher rate, then I may be proud.
Okay. All right, we're going to take a break, and there's lots more to talk about, so stay with us. I'm back. I'm not going to talk about skiing, but I do want to talk about the special report that you will find on renegade.com. There is so much meat in this, in the 12 steps to a more effective B2B brand strategy in 2020, that there are probably some folks out there that think I'm crazy to put that out there in front of a firewall. But I'm really hoping to get feedback from some of you all on the report, perhaps what's missing, because again, the book is going to be developed against this outline, but fleshing it out. There might be some guests that could help fill in some of the areas. You may disagree with some of the things. I'm really interested in your opinion on this piece, and your engagement with it will really help make the book that much stronger. So you'll find it on renegade.com. Very top, there's a banner that says 12 steps to a more effective B2B brand strategy. Take a look. We're back. And we were talking about metrics. In our pre-call, in a prep call, you mentioned something that you talked about looking at customer satisfaction as a metric, and you were talking about NPS, but you also had customer effort score, which I thought was so interesting. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you measure it and what that means?
Yeah, no problem. So, Net Promoter Score is the score where likelihood to recommend. Customer effort score is a point-in-time score where the simplest of ways, if you think as a consumer, it's the smiley face, sad face, neutral face that you can press when you leave an airport bathroom, for example. Which we're never going to touch. Which we're never going to touch again. Not even with your knuckle. You should not touch that. But it is a very simple way that you actually end up getting through simplicity, you end up getting more engagement and more sample size of people actually providing you with feedback. And if you take a step back as a B2B company, you want more of your customers to tell you how they feel, but surveys are onerous. But if you can make it simple during meaningful or after meaningful moments that matter, you can gauge a general sentiment. And it's better to have a sentiment of, I'm very happy, I'm very sad, or I'm kind of ambivalent about this than it is to not get any feedback at all. And so we're looking at the notion of customer effort score to say, hey, after you did this, were you happy, sad, or neutral? And it helps us understand, because if we feel like after a trial of a product, for example, people were sad, that's good enough indication that it's worth deep diving into and actually looking at how do we actually make people less sad. The intricacies of having, in the case of NPS, a 200-point scoring mechanism that takes a long time to administer, very small sample sizes typically, are great for certain things, but a customer effort score during moments that matter that allow you just to get a very quick pulse of how your customers feel are a really great way of being able to then understand how they feel in the moment and then dive in and actually improve those moments that matter in a very agile fashion.
Yeah, I'm really ambivalent on Net Promoter Score. I love its simplicity and convenience, but I often find that there isn't as much of a correlation. You can have a high Net Promoter Score and you're not getting any referrals. And you say, wait, okay, so what really matters to me is among those folks that gave you a 9 or 10, how many actually really recommended you? And then, the sort of second thing that B2B brands really suffer from is not having enough case histories. So what percentage of your customers that gave you a high Net Promoter Score will let you talk about them? Yep. That to me is a real indication that they're happy. So if 1/3 of your customers are willing to talk about you in public, that's to me, that's a bankable number. Whereas Net Promoter Score is, and the other problem with Net Promoter Score is so you have a score, now what?
Right.
Why? What made up that number? What's good? What's bad? How do you fix things? All you know is it was a moment in time, and you really don't know what it is. But that's an argument for another day. Now, you talked about a values journey that you were going through, and when we talked before, you came up with some remarkable language, and I think that will be good because it'll help us talk about what F5 does for a second, because I know we've spent now 27 minutes and we actually haven't talked about what the company does. But I seem to recall you had some language, code connects us all. And because I asked you, did you have a purpose? And you said that. So do you have a purpose?
And that was the question that got us in our pre-call.
Yeah.
And we do. And we have this belief that code connects us all. We have an incredibly complex set of products that do incredible things for the planet. And those incredible things are helping flights take off and, land on time. Those incredible things are helping diagnose patients that are, coming in as stroke victims and increase the probability of them being able to walk out and being able to talk when they leave because of how fast the diagnosis is. It's being able to protect people's credit card balances, gift card balances, making sure that no one hacks into your cell phone account and goes into the Apple store and picks up a phone on your behalf, which isn't you, and then ships it off to China and then resells it and makes $100 and you just paid for someone else's new phone. Those are things we do on this planet, but explaining it from a technology standpoint is really complex, and there's a lot of people that need to understand that. But from a customer standpoint and from a purpose standpoint, putting meaning behind the impact that we have for people on this planet is really important. And that's through our technology, but really importantly for us, it's how we do our work. We are firm believers that you can drive incredible economic value for your shareholders by still being great people to each other. And that means us, it means our partners, it means within the community. You can drive incredible results while still doing that. And that is something that we pride ourselves on in terms of, being good to each other as colleagues, being good to each other in terms of our partners and our customers, and being good to the community and giving back to the community and using technology for good. And so that component of having this incredible impact through our technology on this planet, but also doing so as really good humans and giving back to the community is our purpose. So we believe that code connects us all, both in the ones and zeros that make up an application that helps you find a ride in the rain here in New York, or helping with a medical diagnosis, or also the code in terms of our genetic code and our code of ethics that we aren't going to do things at all costs, and we are going to do the right thing always. And if it means walking away from a deal, we will do that, just because again it isn't driving shareholder value at all costs.
So you would do very well. I often do run meetings with a group of B2B CMOs, and I will ask them to describe what their company does in 8 words or less. And it's usually when they're at the 25th word, we have to hit the gong button, because they're all technology companies. So you would now be able to do that, and you probably need a couple other words besides, we're a company that creates code that connects us all, but that's still 6 words. So that would be, you'd pass that challenge quite nicely. Now, the next part of this is, because it's beautiful language, it's clever, it's got layers that you can build on. It's an empty vessel that needs to be filled. How and what are some of the things that you're doing or planning to do to make this idea that is very powerful come to life?
So what we started to do was actually create an internal movement. I'm a firm believer that exceptional companies are exceptional because their employees believe they're exceptional companies. You can't just state that you're an exceptional company and hope that you'll be an exceptional company and get there. Exceptional companies are exceptional because the employees that work for those companies truly believe in the impact that they have on their customers, on the planet. And so we started the internal movement to really demonstrate to our own employees, this is what you do every day. Like, this is the impact that you have. When you put this product out into market, you're protecting people against having, school in Poland, making sure that kids can compute in a school in Poland and have their identities protected. That's a big deal. And so we want to make sure that we inspire our own employees. So what we did was we started talking about the notion of code connects us all and started describing what that means. And then light bulbs started going off, and it was just almost like, it was a big Grinch-like in terms of their heart started growing 3 times bigger. Is like, now I actually feel this. I had a woman come into my office and say, hey, I've been worked here for 8 years, and I finally feel this connection with what I do, and the impact that I have. I finally can explain and feel the impact that I have, on our customers, which is really amazing. And so we started going around with the company and recording people's stories about how they felt like code connects us all, whether it's how they connected with the community because they volunteered and at an F5 event to help feed homeless people, or whether it was that they put in a security measure for a school in Poland to be able to help protect school students and the students and their identities. And so we started this movement internally and started talking about it, and then we started sharing it externally. And it was amazing to see the reaction of people. Like, I've shown a video of these testimonials by our own employees, and just talking about the impact of this code connecting and allowing Pandora to be able to stream its, stream without interruption its music, or being able to have, a sports team be able to stream their games without interruption, so you don't miss the winning goal. And it's amazing to see the emotional reaction to people hearing about that impact from our own employees and our own personal stories. So how we plan on doing that ongoing is having our customers be able to start telling that story alongside us as well.
I love that story. And one of the things that we do, because we do a lot of B2B brand strategy over here at Renegade, and is we insist on doing an employee survey upfront. Yeah. And one of the things so interesting to ask is, do you believe that the company has a brand purpose? And then ask them open-ended, what is that purpose? And it's fascinating because you can tell the difference between companies that have them and don't. Because what happens is most employees will define it based on the department they're in and the function that they perform. And until you give them really clear words, and this is why we believe that the words do need to be carefully crafted. It can't be sort of a strategy statement. It needs to be words that are elevated, that will move you and have multiple meetings or have some attention or are inspirational. Because if you don't, they'll never remember them. They don't know how to make them their own. So it sounds like you did all that. And the other great thing about having a pre-survey is once you have it in market, you can, in addition to the anecdotes, you'll be able to benchmark. You'll be able to see that reaction, and then you'll be able to see it. So I love the fact that you did it internally first, and that's so important. Because if you don't, again, if employees don't believe it, then why bother? Yeah, who will? And so then you start with the customers, and it's interesting. I imagine that they didn't think of it that way either. They thought of it on a more functional level. Oh, you helped our app do this or that. And they go, oh, it's about connections. It's about bringing us together. Oh, that's kind of cool. How do we participate in that?
Absolutely. The companies that we have reached out to have then, again, it's nice to be able to go to a company and say, hey, will you engage with us in this way? And I don't know if you've ever tried to get an employee, customer evidence piece out of a customer. It's usually a negotiation. But if you say, this is what we're going to do with it, and this is how we're going to feature it, I mean, you almost see, again, a Grinch-like moment of the corner of their, mouth smiles. And you're like, oh, that totally resonates with me. It'll resonate with my employees. And it actually, elevates the people's jobs who help implement our technology, which are typically unsung heroes. Like, they're the people that don't want a phone call, because if they're getting a phone call, something really terrible has happened. But they actually actually are the unsung heroes of companies who help, applications go down, things stop working. You can't process credit cards. You can't deposit at a bank. You can't make a cell phone call if what we do stops working. And so it helps, I think, drive a little inspiration on our own customers' behalf to say, yeah, I do that for my company. And it does provide their own meaning around what they do, which is exciting. I think the other piece that we've done is we haven't called it a brand purpose. There's a connotation of what marketing does and doesn't do at our company because it's a product hardware company historically. So we've talked about our company rally cry. I mean, this is about the company. This isn't a marketing movement. This is a company movement that has engaged more engineers and more support people and more naysayers who would be like, it's just marketing. It's not just this is our company, and we need our company to believe in this.
Yeah, I hear you, and it is one of the reasons why we won't engage with a client unless the CEOs on board, because they have to be part of it. They have to believe in it. We call it a purpose-driven story statement because the idea is that it becomes the center of all the stories that the brand can tell. But you're absolutely right that it has to be perceived as something that is bigger than marketing. And if purpose is somehow perceived as a marketing thing, then you're right, it will just be. So calling it a rallying cry is perfect. Yes, code connects us all. Okay, so there's a number of lessons learned. I don't think that many of you CMO listeners are necessarily going to want to rush and become chief experience officers, but make the case for why they should.
I think you should, just because you sit at the forefront of creating all the customer engagement for the company. I mean, if you're a CMO that is really plugged into the entire customer journey, you're engaged with the product individuals, you're engaged with support, you're engaged with sales. And so because of those engagement points, you know a lot and you learn a lot and you have a lot of insights on what it takes to actually improve that engagement. Because every moment matters, and some matter more than others. And moments that matter are the ones that drive delight or they drive sadness. And you have the opportunity to be able to look end to end and impact that delight and that happiness and that simplicity. And so I think because of the function that we play and the role that we try to play in driving delight and engagement and desire and connection with our customers, it's a perfect fit. Again, if you so choose.
Yeah, and so the counterpoint to that is it's a big enough job without it. I don't think you can be successful without partnering with a CX person. I mean, clearly marketing is dependent on so many different roles, from finance and making sure that they give you budget, and HR to make sure that you can actually communicate with your employees and do things like change comp plans and review systems and all of those things. So if you aren't going to take on CX alone, obviously you have to partner with whoever is, and hopefully your company does have a CXO or somebody who's dedicated to it. I would think the other part of it is, if you're going to have both roles, then you better really have a strong VP of marketing and a strong data person and probably a strong, whatever else that gets you to customer experience. But okay, so that's one. You may or may not want to rush into your boss's office and add CX. But I do think being able to simplify how you measure, we talked a lot about that and thinking about measures in terms of, you talked about pipeline, and that seems to be a common, when I ask for metrics that matter, marketing driven pipeline seems to be top of the list. We didn't talk really about how you measure brand, but we'll save that for another episode. We talked about getting departmental buy-in. I'm wondering if you could just sort of the biggest lessons learned from your experience thus far in these dual roles.
I think in these dual roles, because we're driving a transformation, a lot of the role has to do with change management. And I think it's understanding the difference between driving a small coalition of the willing to show what's possible and then having other people join, or in other cases, driving an entire company movement and knowing when to do one or the other. Driving an entire change across an entire company and forcing people to do something that isn't inspired or that they don't want to do typically doesn't turn out that well. And often starting with a small coalition of the willing that are happy to show what's possible allows you almost to say, it seems counterintuitive because it's only involving, we've got a coalition of the willing working on a certain initiative right now, and there's 14 people out of hundreds of sellers that are helping us. But I assure you that if we can actually, and what we're doing is we're testing these theories of if we actually use data with these 14 sellers more effectively to predict where they should focus in their accounts, that they will close deals faster, those deals will be bigger. And so we're taking them and creating essentially a sales twin, looking at someone who's been at the company just as long and comparing and contrasting, and it's a horse race, and showing how their peers who look exactly on paper as them, how they actually are pulling out ahead. And when you start to see as a seller other people around you that are just like you retire quota faster and get to club faster and close bigger deals, that becomes a massive motivator to be interested in what they're doing. And so that's an instance where we could have, at our sales conference, forced everybody to drive these data-driven approaches or taken 14 people to do it among hundreds. And I think in the end, we'll end up seeing with bigger impact and bigger uptake of these approaches by having started small and going big.
Yeah, and I love that. That's just because it's really about some small victories in testing, just constantly trying new things. One of the great thing about being in the marketing role is there is an expectation that you're going to bring fresh thinking to the table. And so you have that opportunity, but don't blow it, as you suggested, and going big, you don't necessarily need the big ta-da. What you need is proof, and you can do that through testing. And I love this language of coalition of the willing to create a company movement. That's an awesome place for us to wrap up the show. So thank you so much for joining us here in New York City.
Yeah, serendipitously that I was here, so it's good to see you in person, Drew.
Yeah, no, it's really good. It always makes for a better show. Don't tell that to the folks that are just have to do it on Zoom. All right, well, as always, thank you to the listeners for spending the time with us. I hope you got a lot out of the show. As always, you know how to reach me. I'm looking for your text though on this one because I think you're going to get some. You're going to have some inspiration, and I'll give you my cell phone 917-679-8852. Text away. Give me your thoughts on this. And how you can, what kind of things you're doing to create a coalition of the willing. And with that, thank you. And until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.